But stories are how we communicate. I was thinking, what story would I tell to start this morning? So here's a story. So 1987, I'm living in Mississippi with my parents, and I have a job over at James River where my dad works. He's got me a good gig over there. And so I start to show an interest in a little girl named Kelly McCarra. Kelly McCarra, well, she's not little. She's no, it's not your mom. You'll know why in a minute, right? So, I began to go to her house over in Quitman, Mississippi. I'd go over there, and my parents had, the only way to make a Buick worse is to make it a diesel Buick in 1987. So my parents had a diesel Buick. You know that you put the accelerator down because it would get louder. That's how you knew that it should be going faster, but it wouldn't. But that's not the point. The point is I drove the Buick over after about, 3 weeks, going over and seeing Kelly McCarra about 2 or 3 times a week after work. And so I'd go over there, and then so I thought, okay, tonight's the night. When I leave tonight, I'm going to kiss Kelly McCarra, right? So the whole thing sets up nice. We have our little visit. I'm going to the front door. She walks me to the front door, and I just give her a nice little kiss, just a nice little, right? Very delicate, very nice, pretty smooth actually, right? So I'm walking away, and I turn to her as I'm walking toward the car, and I look, and Kelly's looking at me, and I'm thinking, that's right. A little bit of this, you got to think about it, right? So I'm walking away, and I get to the car, and I go to look in, and I want to sneak back to see if she's still looking at me. Now, Kelly is looking at me kind of like this, and I'm thinking, oh, James, this is working out wonderfully. I'm in her head. This is great. This is the best goodnight kiss she's ever had. It was wonderful. It was respectful. It was great because she's looking. And so then I open the door. I open the door to the Buick, and I get inside it, and I sit down, and now she's looking at me very confused. And I thought, well, this is getting a little weird. This is kind of strange, but I guess, right? So I lean over. I'm sitting there, and I go, got to go. So I reach into my pocket, and I pull out the keys to that Buick, and I go. They don't fit. So I'm still looking at her, and she's looking at me, and I lean over to think, what's going on? And I go, my parents don't have leather seats in their Buick. I had walked out and gotten into her dad's Oldsmobile. So that is why, Spencer, shortly thereafter, I couldn't go visit Kelly McCarra anymore. After that, there's only one thing to do, which is to say it's her fault. That's all you can do at that point, right? Stories, though, are how we communicate. There's all kinds. I was going to tell Joey the story about when you and Scott. Joey, are you here? Yeah. Where are you here? There you are. I was going to tell the story about when you and Scott snuck out that night, but I think, that's been told before. But it's a great story. Remember I told that one when I was afraid of the rapture? Remember that one? When they actually snuck out, right? That was a good story. I was thinking about stories. We this may surprise some of you guys who don't know us that well, but we Knights are a talking people. So but Josie and I last night, we're coming home from somewhere, and she was talking about, she knows all the stories growing up. I know the stories. One of my favorite stories was my Uncle Jimmy. You guys, some of you are old enough to remember the big civil rights thing when the 4 civil rights workers, this is not the funny part of the story at all, the 4 civil rights workers were killed in Mississippi, just 2 or 3 miles away from where my grandparents live, where my dad grew up. Well, my Uncle Jimmy, he tells the story one night. He's deciding, this was shortly after that, they weren't thinking, that my Uncle Jimmy decides he's going to go down to the park that is in Union, Mississippi, and he's going to blow up a toilet. Good all-American fun, right? So he tells me the name of the guy Uncle Jimmy talks about, how he goes down there, and his buddy and him, they put dynamite in the toilet, they light it, they run, and boom, and they're having a great time when suddenly 20 FBI agents with automatic weapons are surrounding them. Because what they didn't know was the informant from that 4 civil rights thing, that one of the guys who was there, the informant was being housed in that very same neighborhood. So when that thing blew up, the FBI agents thought it was a threat against their informant. So they're on the ground. They're sitting there. They're handcuffed. He says they're handcuffed behind them, right? They're on the ground, and the FBI agents are walking around. He says he's down there in the dirt going, what in the world? And he says, his buddy says to him, Jimmy. He goes, what? He goes, hey, Jimmy, what? Remember this, Joe? He says, think we can make it. Uncle Jimmy said, no. Stories are how we communicate. We are essentially storytellers, and every family in here has stories that you guys talk about. When you get together, we were down south not long ago, Michelle and I, and Denise said, tell that story. So we told the story about how she taught me how to ride the bicycle. It's not a good story, it's gory. It's a bad story. I end up looking bad. So I won't tell that today. I prefer where I look better. But that's actually the point of it. The point, hey, listen, that Buick looked just like an Oldsmobile. They were shaped the same, right? But that's actually the point I'm getting is we all tell stories. And in these stories we tell, it's a way to make the world fit. Who the bad guy is, who the good guy is. In fact, we kind of romanticize these things. And by that what I mean is everybody's all good or everybody's all bad in the stories we tell. In the stories we have right now, who the good guys are, the bad guys, we assign to people the motivations in the stories we tell. We create narratives about our own life. And like I just said, and in our own life, these stories that we're actually always typically the hero in our stories because we know our motivation is good. In our stories we tell people, we typically say, we assign to ourselves, we give ourselves the credit of our intentions, don't we? But we always give other people the blame of their behaviors. In our story, I know what I meant. I didn't mean for that to happen, but we don't typically give the same to someone else. We judge ourselves by our intentions, other people by their behaviors in these stories. And we are the main character in our story. And I've been told this in the past. People go, I'm not the man, I like myself, I'm not the main story. And I'm like, I can prove it with one simple question. Who's the first person you look at in a group photo? Yourself. It's you. You'll base the entire group photo, whether it's a good photo or a bad photo, based upon how you, that's a great picture. Oh no, we need to take it again, somebody says. It's all based upon what you look like, what they look like. We are all the main characters in our stories. And in our, as I said earlier, if you're the main character in the story, it's a very basic question. Do you think you typically think of yourself as the villain or the good guy? You're basically the good guy. We don't like to think of ourselves in the worst possible light. I told this story. Jeff and I used to work in corrections, but when I was at Oak Creek, I told this story not too long ago. It's Christmas, so we're showing the best Christmas movie of all time, which of course is what? Die Hard. Thank you. It is a Christmas movie. It is a Christmas movie, and if you don't like it, River of Life doesn't think it is either. Go down there. It's a Christmas movie. Dang it. So we're showing, thank you. Now, for once, Daryl's excited at church. Yippee-yi-yay, right? No. So the line is here. I will get close to it. So we are showing this, and I'm showing it in the violent offender unit at Oak Creek. It's a bunch of guys, age 16, 17, all the way up a couple of them to 23, 24, and they've committed some heinous crimes. And it hit me that day, this life-shaking realization, as they were watching Bruce Willis fight against in the tower, was it Nakatomi Tower or whatever, and he's fighting against the terrorist. It hit me. Who were they rooting for? They're rooting for Bruce Willis. They're rooting for, they consider themselves the good guy. They're identifying with the good guy in this story, not the behaviors they've done, but what they've assigned to themselves in the stories, which is, it's not my fault that happened, it's their fault. I'm a good guy. And so I've asked you guys a question a few months ago, and I don't know if you remember it, but I actually asked, I think it was a very good question, which was, what if you're the villain in somebody else's story? That's a hard one to swallow. Because what if you're the villain in many ways and people very close to you that you love? And that's not where I'm going today, but it led into this question. What if you're actually the villain in your own story? What if you're the villain in your story? And most people don't ever want to consider that. In fact, I'd say most of us have never thought of that we may be the villain. But how about this? Maybe before you get upset with me for saying, I will say that you're the villain quite often in your own story. Before you get upset with me, I'll tell you, I'm not the one who said it. Look at Romans 7. Look at that. And it's weird, Spencer said, he actually said this earlier when he was praying, and he hasn't seen the slide till now. For what I am doing, I do not understand. This is the Apostle Paul. For I am not practicing what I would like to do, but I am doing the very thing I hate. So now, no longer am I the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. For the good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. Who's the villain in your story? Well, as it turns out, 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, it's you. And isn't that true for all of us? I'd like you to consider this. Who's the number one person who gets in the way of you being who you want to be, who you wish you were? Who's the number one person who gets in the way of you becoming the father, the dad, the mother, the person that you wish you were? Who's the number one person, guys? It's you. It's me. Who is responsible for your anger? Who's responsible for your bitterness? Now, here's what's going to happen. Some of you are going to say the first thing, my dad. My dad, you don't know what that... Okay, I'm not here to devalue the pain you ever had. I'm not here to say the seriousness of the offense was less. That's not my point. But I'm just going to say this. Some of you guys are 63 years old. Some of you are 47. Some of you are 28, 75. I've talked to people who were still mad and bitter with their parents, and they've buried their parents. It's been years since the offense happened. They've had lifetimes to deal with this stuff. So I do ask you guys, if you're saying it's somebody else's fault, your upbringing, what they did to you, and again, I'm not saying that it wasn't a valid offense, that you didn't have a right to feel injured. What I am going to ask you is, what have you done in the intervening years? What have you done? You see, you're the villain in your story if you wasted your time. You're the one getting in the way if you're still not seeking healing in its proper fashion, but instead you nurse a wound. You're the one never dealing with the bitterness growing inside of you, a bitterness that has made many of us, the villains in the stories of other people close to us. It was that bitterness, it was that hurt that I didn't deal with. I just met with a young man. He had talked to me the other day, and I said, hey, the goal in the pain that you're going through is to make sure that you do not, because we've said this in the past, you guys do realize that time does not heal all wounds, right? Time will inevitably change all wounds. They will change, they will morph into something. So this young man I was talking to, I simply said, you have the choice on whether or not you become someone who is a bitter parent to your child. Is your kid going to have a bitterness because of what's been done to you? It starts now. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's up to you. And again, I want to say this thing. This bitterness that you allowed to dictate the last 30 years of your life, that's created anger, bitterness, judgment, criticism, hurt other people, I am not saying that original wound was not a valid offense given to you. I am saying, what have you done with the intervening years where you could have pursued healing? The good news is that's not my message today. It's just setting up the story of your life. Because what's happening is your refusal to seek healing at some point, that's your fault. But the reason that many of us don't want to hear this is because even worse than the knowledge that you're the problem, you're the villain, well, it's the pain that comes with that realization. It's okay. Maybe you understand. You get to a certain point and you go, I know that it's my thing, that in my story I need to deal with what I did, what I accomplished. I need to deal with this, that my bitterness, my anger, my lack of judgment, my lack of empathy, my lack of affection, all this stuff that I am now, it's my fault. I have to deal with it. I know that I was raised in this home. I know this was done to me, but I'm a grown woman. I'm a grown man. I have wasted 25 years. And you look in the mirror and you see what you are, and the pain of it is overwhelming. Can't you hear the pain in Paul? What I want to do, I don't do. What I need to do, I don't do. What I don't want to do, I did it again. It's painful. And there's many ways that we go about muting this voice in our head, that we are not the person that we wish we were in our narrative. There's many ways. Glenn and I talk about this all the time. Glenn absolutely comes up and he'll laugh. He'll go, oh, that used to be me. Totally forthright and go, that's how I used to, right? You'll say this stuff without any shame of anything, because the new creature that he is in God, how he views himself now is a creature that's been transformed, right? It's nothing. Working on it. But I'm saying to you guys that many of us, this pain, we don't want to deal with. I had someone tell me one time that if an individual close to me knew what they had actually done to hurt us, they'd probably be overwhelmed to the point of death. It's a big deal, and it's hard to recognize when we look in the mirror what we really are, that we don't play the part of the hero in the narrative of our life, but we are, in fact, in many ways, the villain. And so the number one way we mute the voice that perhaps not as all is not as I would like, the number one way we mute the voice is to control the narrative. I had dinner at Bob and Judy Wilson's house, and I invite all of you to go there. Chicken parmesan, right, with Texas toast. And then gelato, was that how you pronounce that delicious little ice gelato? A little delicious treat that, as you heard, violently did not sit well with Don Knight. We're having a wonderful conversation when suddenly my stomach goes, "Brr, go home now." Oh, okay, all right. But I would recommend you guys all go over there, and it's beautiful, and I have no idea where I was going with this. Oh, no. Bob and I both worked at the same place one time. And it was a horrible place to work, but they paid me so much money that I don't think I'm supposed to say the name. That's how bad you know that they hate you, is when they give you a lot of money to leave, right? So this place, though, the number one thing in my position was they said you have to control the narrative. That's it. I was in management. It was manage the perception, manage people's perception. That was the number one thing. It was literally, we were taught, you have to manage perception. You'll get nowhere in this company unless you manage perception. And it was exhausting for me. I couldn't do it. I hated it. If nothing else, I tell you guys, if nothing else, call me stupid, say unwise, say that wasn't the best. You can do all that, and I'll probably agree with you. But if you think I'm putting on a show and trying to be something I'm not, that I thought it through in a way to manipulate you, that's a lie. I am who I am, and I'm working on that. I'm trying to get more wise. I'm trying to get less stupid. I'm trying to do that. But the one thing I don't want to do is work on controlling the perception, being fake. And this thing, it actually ended up being horrific. The weight of that. Managing perception, but that is actually the number one way that we can mute the voice, that we are not who we think we are. Manage the narrative. Make sure that people manipulate. We talked about this. One of the ways to do it, honestly, is use heated words. It's to be the smartest guy in the room, to shut people down with your knowledge about something. It's to stand up, to get big, to get loud, to make sure that people understand who you are, to manipulate their response to you. Control the narrative. Oh, he's the smart guy. They're the generous guy, which we're going to get to. They're this, they're that, to make sure that we mute the narrative, that we control the narrative, and we mute the voice in our head that says, well, maybe I'm not. No, I must be, because listen to what people say about me, and you must say it about me. And I'll do anything to make sure you say it about me. And the truth of it is, we try to get these voices around us so loudly saying what we want to be told. You're the guy, you're the guy, you're the guy. Because if their voices are loud enough, they will drown out the still, small voice within us saying what? No, you're not. You are broken. If you remember the very beginning of what we're into, which is the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said the number one defining characteristic of any citizen of the kingdom of heaven is living in a constant awareness of our desperate need for God. That still small voice that says you need to listen. Something's not right. Your anger, whether it's on the football field, whether it's at the news, all of this bitterness, all of this stuff, you need to listen. There's a better way for you to represent, and freedom and joy are found on the other side. But that still small voice, we don't want to hear. No, I'm fine. Because to look at the damage our lives has wrought is so painful, we will mute every voice in here that God is trying to speak clearly by elevating the voices around us and manipulating them. And according to Jesus, we'll get to Jesus now. According to Jesus, one of the best tools we have to manage people's perception is to act religious. Isn't that great? One of the best ways we have to make sure that people think of me highly is to act religious. I've been in churches where religiosity was the number one thing. Relationships, they would say it's about relationships perhaps, but I knew it wasn't about relationships. It was about making sure people knew what I'm against. I am against what you are doing. Look at me. Religious behaviors. religious behaviors. And if I don't drink, don't smoke, don't swear, I must be better than those people who do. Correct? If I got the right haircut, the right look, the right politics, the right this, I am in. I am religious. I give. I do the right thing. And this was actually true in the first century for Israel as well. People who were claiming to worship God, well, they were publicly practicing religious behaviors. But they were doing so not out of devotion, but out of a desperate need for validation. I want you to think about that. Being religious, doing public behaviors of righteousness, good behaviors, but not doing it out of a sense of devotion to God, not doing it because you're being drawn into this deeper relationship, and the natural manifestation would be this behavior, but instead not devotion, but out of a desperate need for validation. Revealing what? Revealing that God was not, in fact, He was not, in fact, the target of their behaviors at all, but they were, instead, the object of their worship. People who were being so religious. And so Jesus, early in His ministry, He delivers what I've just referred to, what we call the Sermon on the Mount. And He's describing what citizens of the kingdom of heaven would actually look like. I want you to understand that as you're reading this. He's actually describing the natural things, the natural behaviors, the natural manifestations, as I said, that would arrive as someone who had the heaven where God is, the Holy Spirit, living within them. These things would naturally occur. And we call this the Sermon on the Mount. So let's pick it up right where we're at. Let's look at Matthew 6, 1 through 6. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. Leave it right there. Go right back to that for a minute. Okay, so I did a lot of study on that. I'm not for sure what that means. Apparently, though, there may have actually been occasions within the temple and occasions within the day where there would be there'd be noises, trumpets, cymbals that would go off, and those would be the time that some of these people would practice their public behaviors. Does that make sense? I'm not for sure what that means, except to know they were doing it to be public. There you go. So that they may be, again, honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. When you pray, you are not to be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners, so that they may be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But you, when you pray, go into your inner room, close your door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So Jesus starts with this opening statement where He basically says this. He says, don't do the right things for the wrong reasons. So right away, he basically takes all of the religious upbringing most of us had that were about just simple rules or behaviors that would show you are righteous, and he goes, we're not talking about behaviors, we are talking about the motivation behind these behaviors. He starts with this very idea of heart. Now I want to be clear. Jesus never says for us to stop doing the right thing. Jesus never says, stop practicing righteousness. He's not going to say that. Jesus never says, stop being generous in your giving. He never says that. Jesus never says to stop praying. Never says that. And I say that because what I find fascinating is that Jesus just assumes that God's people are already doing these things. So I would say to you that if you're someone, I'll go back, who actually your behaviors are not righteous, you don't practice behaviors that reflect God's heart, that you actually aren't generous in your giving to the church or giving to the poor or giving to people in your family, that if you're not generous, if you're someone who doesn't pray, who doesn't have a life of setting aside a time to pray, I would tell you, well, start there today. But moving ahead, he said that God's people, well, they should practice righteousness. Why? We should practice righteous behaviors because our hearts resemble God's heart. Our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, that's your heart. And our hearts, our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, they should reflect God's. God's people should be generous. But here's the issue. Our generosity, individually and corporately, should never point back to us individually or corporately. Our generosity should always point back to who? To God. That we rejoice in the ability to use the blessings, because I've said this, whatever blessing you have, it was never intended to cease with its arrival in your hand. We are the instruments by which God chooses to bless this world, are we not? So when we give, the blessing goes back to God. It's just this amazing, our generosity should reflect back to God. God's people should pray. But our prayers should desire and should reflect a desire to elevate God, not to be elevated by men. So we should be doing all of these things. Now, I can certainly say Jesus is speaking primarily not to behaviors, but to motivation. But can we be honest in here? Can't we certainly see what someone is motivated by their behaviors? Can't we? Can't you guys see? Don't you sense when somebody... Haven't you ever been somewhere with religious people where something feels off? Am I the only one? Haven't you ever been somewhere where a religious person starts to do something and you're going, I just don't think this is... Sure seems to me like this person's making it about themselves. And I'm not saying you were right, but I'm also not saying that you were wrong. There are instances that we've all been around this type of thing, these behaviors. And I can tell you, as I witness their behaviors in a religious setting, what motivates them. Heck, forget about faith. Can't you just see that in normal life? Can't you see what's important to somebody but how they behave? Absolutely. So Jesus highlights behaviors which are going to reveal the hearts behind them. Behaviors that in the first century they would have seen all the time. And they would have been practiced by the very people that were elevated by the people. Pharisees, religious leaders, those who were seen as the gatekeepers to God, the very examples of righteousness. See, you have to understand how scandalous what Jesus is saying to the people, because he's pointing out to them the very ones that they looked up to and said, oh, they are amazing, and he is saying, no, they are not. In fact, he starts, unless your righteousness exceeds theirs, you will never get the kingdom of heaven. He's saying to them, the things you have elevated, well, they are wrong. So the first thing that he is going to talk about in highlighting these behaviors is the giving of your money. He said it basically, we're going to paraphrase it today. He says, don't broadcast it all the time. Don't just always be talking about it. One of the things that I was raised the other way. Mother, this is you may want to close your ears. I'm going to talk about your deficiencies as a parent right now. Good. You want to hear it? Okay. But most of you were raised the same way that I was growing up. We come from a generation, if you're my age, to, I don't know, the generation ahead of me, to I don't know when it stopped behind me, but I was definitely square in the middle, that the one thing we as a family never talked about was what? Money. We didn't talk, I was taught you never ask what somebody makes. What did you guys say? Joyce, what did you say? Did you say sex? That too, yeah. Yeah, no, we were good Baptists. We didn't do that. Oh, man, I just had the funniest joke come up, and I'll tell you guys later, but I need credit for the grace, for the wisdom that here we go. But no, it was money. It was money. We were never, I didn't know. I remember asking my dad one time how much he made, and Mother, we were told that polite people don't ask about money. Is that not correct? Yeah. Giving, and I think we actually didn't know enough about giving because that was also this thing. We were taught that we didn't really do this, but I knew people who did broadcast on the other side of it, who were always talking about the amount of money they gave and how much they gave to the church and how much they gave to this. And in fact, I will say, if you want to know how much money people gave and where their heart is, go to a Baptist business meeting. Is that you laugh and only the Baptists are laughing, aren't you? Because it becomes a situation at many churches of, wait a minute, I give X amount of dollars, which should mean that I get X amount of say-so. Is that not true? We control the narrative. I'm now the one with the power. I'm the one. The same thing is true. So Jesus is saying here, don't broadcast it all the time. Now, he's not saying never speak to your giving. I don't believe that. I don't believe Jesus is saying, that's just making another rule, isn't it? Just making another rule that, here at LifePoint, we will never, ever, ever, I will never mention how much money we give to anything. Well, that's stupid. That there are many times, I want you guys, honestly, there are what There are times people come up with these amazing things where they'll tell me, this past 2 months, we decided that we were going to up our giving and we were going to do this and we didn't know where it was going to come from. And we upped it to X amount of dollars. And then last month, you know how much money came in? You guys know the story. That exact amount of money. We would be foolish not to share such things that are encouraging to the body, that build faith in the body. But again, that generosity points back to who? That doesn't say, look at me. I've had some people here in the last, and I won't bring you guys into it name-wise, but you know who you are. I had a whole conversation on the phone with an individual here where I said, your faithfulness and this humbles me. I don't know if I could have done what you did. That you weren't even at a church for a while, but you and your bride kept putting your tithe away, even though there was no church to give it to, and then you found us and you gave us big lump sum. And I said, that's great, but it also sets a pretty good expectation for me now. It's a good monthly tithe, apparently, it was 6 months, which, whatever. But to not talk about such things individually to glorify God would not edify God. So he's not saying that. He's not saying never talk about it. What he is saying, though, what is he saying? Look at the next one I got like 2B we put, but look it up. He says, don't give so that you will be honored by men. It's very basic, isn't it? Don't give so that you can be honored by men. In fact, some of that is, are you not a man or woman? Don't do it because you somehow think, oh, look how it elevates me. Don't do it to broadcast to other people. He says, examine yourself to ensure that it's not for some praise or some validation you crave. Your money, what you give, and we're going to get into that, what it means to actually give it. Some of you have a problem, you give it without giving it. You give it, but you still hold on to it. But this idea, he says, don't do it. Examine yourself to make sure that you're giving in all you do, and it doesn't have to be money, but I believe this time it is. That the money you give is not for validation. And then he says the same thing about prayer. Praying publicly so people will see you and be impressed. That you don't want to make sure. It's like tipping with me, right? I've shared this with you guys. I want people to know, I want people to know how much they're tipping or how much their service meant to me. So I've actually, and I don't know if this is right. I'm giving you guys get to judge me on this. So like I tip pretty good for a guy who doesn't make a lot of money, but I tip pretty good. So I'll give like somebody does something good, and I'll have like a 20. And at Dutch Brothers or something, they're all in there working hard. So I'll go to put it in, and she's right here, and she's asking, it's Dutch Brothers. How are you doing, sir? What's on plan for the day? Right? Am I right? Yeah. They're talking, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I needed that this morning, and they're all being great in there. So I'll pull out a 20, and I'll, Ashley, you leaving? It's because I'm talking about tipping? Is it? You don't want to be convicted? So I'll pull out a 20, which obviously I'm alone, and Michelle's not with me. So I'll pull out a 20, and I'm going to give it, put it in the bucket right there, and then she'll turn away. And I'm like this. I lost my reward. I want her to know that I'm tipping 20, right? And I've convinced myself that it's because I want her to know how much I appreciate it, but I think it's because I want her to know I'm tipping 20. So it's the same thing with our prayer. It's the same thing. This idea of what do you actually want from this? That I want them at the end of the day to go, wow, man, people rewarded us today. Or her to go, Don Knight rewarded us today. I think as I was doing that, I think I'm still the hero. $20 is $20. So you guys didn't laugh at that at all. You guys are judgy. And oh, by the way, is Michelle in here? None of you are allowed to say I ever tipped $20 at Dutch, okay? Does that mean that public prayer is prohibited? Is he saying then, when he says don't do it, go somewhere and pray in secret, is Jesus saying that public prayer is prohibited? Yes or no? No. Absolutely not. Jesus is not saying that it can't be. Scripture itself contains many different occasions where people prayed in public. And these descriptions of public prayer were as though they were very common. It was expected. It was expected to be in public prayer. Some of you, when you're out, you always pray at a restaurant. I would simply say this, and this is my opinion. If you're restaurant prayers, I think you should be house prayers. Does that make sense? Right? I think it's one thing for us to gather around. That's great. If you have a heart for prayer, then be a person of prayer. I would like all of us to pray more, but I'm just saying, question your heart. Make sure you're doing it for the right reason. So never pray publicly. Never speak about your giving. Not at all. What Jesus is saying is examine your heart. That's it. Why do you practice religious behaviors? Why? Some of you in the last 5 or 6 years, I have seen that as the world has went to crap, can I say crap? As the world has went, and it's scary and it's terrifying, some of us have pulled back and we become very religious in our setting, and we become a holy huddle, that we don't want to interact, that we need safety from the masses to not be touched. And I would encourage you guys, that's never been our role, and if you're worried about it, read the end of the book. We win. We get our reward. We get the reward. We're going to talk about that. If you want safety, you want security in this world, you want to manipulate things that you feel great about it, we're going to get to that. In fact, I would ask you this: what reward are you looking for? You need to ask yourself this. This is the question today. What reward are you looking for? And I would ask you, for all of you who go, I don't know, follow what Jesus is saying. Your behaviors will point to your motivation. How do you behave? What do you run to for validation? What do you run to for justification? What do you run to for peace, for joy? Religious people, do you run back to the rules? Well, we don't do that. Do you run back? What do you do? Well, I got to pray out loud so people can hear me. I need people to know what I do. I need to be, I don't want anybody to think less of me, so I have to be the smartest guy, the loudest guy, the angry guy. What do you do? What reward do you want? What are you looking for? And I put this on your notes, and I posted this week online. We all, Don Knight, all of us in here, we all need to be very careful about the rewards we seek. And I put it on your card, because the reward you seek will be the reward you receive. Think about that. And it is exclusionary, by the way. It's not along with. I want you to get that. Some of you who go, well, my whole thing is to go to the gym. My whole thing is to have great shiny abs. My whole thing is to get the Botox. My whole thing is to get the mommy makeover. My whole thing is to just pour my life into my physical appearance so that men and women will look at me and go, wow, aren't you sexy? Aren't you hot? Aren't you beautiful? Aren't you desirable? Great, great, great. Then that's what you're going to get. And that's all. Do you understand? And if you think I'm lying, we're going to look at this in just a minute. That's your life? Great. Go after it, I guess. Better enjoy it now, because it goes away so quickly. So Ashley asked me today, she goes, hey, she asked me today, she goes, why are you dressing up and looking all, I think, snazzy or something? And I thought about it, and I thought I've known her long enough, to be honest, it's because I'm getting fat. None of my jeans fit. Anybody in here ever go through that?
We bonded this morning.
Huh? We bonded this morning, and she said, you need to start wearing leggings. They're wonderful. So if next week I wear leggings in here, you guys understand I've given up. That's my version of a face tattoo. I am all in. But you give me 100, you don't know me well. You shouldn't do that. Now, I will tell you this, though. If I do wear leggings in, because I understand leggings, they will have pockets. No, they have to. Every woman in here knows leggings have to have pockets. You stop. Nobody calls them leotards, Peter Pan. Be quiet. All right. What he is saying, though, is this. What he is saying is, examine your heart, because honestly, for all that joking, it's because I really want you guys to understand this is a really painful thing. This is a very painful understanding that, man, what you put all your effort into pursuing, that is exactly the reward you're going to get. People who give so that people will praise them. If you give your money for influence, if you give your money to the church so that you can have some vote, if you give your time. Well, listen, the last church I was at, I suggested that we simply change the pictures, because the kids that were in the pictures, one had grown up and the others had left the church. So I said, let's change the pictures. And the thing that got back was this. We cannot change the pictures because fill in the blank person is going to be so mad. That's their thing. And I thought, well, if their thing is going to be upset, then they're actually controlling what we do because, that's their ministry. I'll ask my mother, my blessed mother. Mother, am I making that up? Or within churches, are there not people who you cannot mess with because that's their ministry and they'll get mad? 100%, right? And so they're not giving anything away. They're keeping it. That's what you want? That's what you want. John, if that's what they want, what are they going to get? That. That's what they're going to get. They have, in fact, he said time and time again, he said they have their reward partially? In full. They have their reward in full. Be careful about what you seek. Be careful about you thinking sexual gratification. Be careful about thinking being the smartest or the loudest or whatever. Be careful. Because if that's what you're seeking, you will get your reward. It'll feel good now, but that's all you get. Randy, is that what you want for Red? Just to get it here? You want her to have something with God, don't you? You want her to send stuff ahead. You want her to send her rewards ahead to heaven. But no, you're going to get it here if that's what you want. People who use occasions of prayer as opportunities to impress. Now, I want to be very clear. There are people who give these flowery things. One of them, I think, is what he's talking about in our society. The other, I think, is some people have just been trained to do it that way. Is that right? Just to give grace, that's what they heard, so that's what they repeat. Can I just tell you, I appreciate authentic prayers. I appreciate talking to someone like you have a relationship with them. That's what I think he's speaking to. In fact, he'll say next week, well, he didn't say next week, he said 2,000 years ago, but we're going to cover it next week, where he says don't just say the same thing over again like pagans. It's not going to have the effect you want. But why do people use occasions of prayer as opportunities to impress? To manage people's perceptions, to control the narrative regarding their righteousness. If you want to be the guy that stands up and you say, and you do, and when somebody, oh no, make sure everybody's with me here, and you make sure that you're always the guy. He says you have your reward in full. If your prayer time is for other people, great. You're going to have your reward in full. Jesus stated this, the whole conversation with the warning. The entire thing comes with the warning. Look at the very beginning of it, the first verse. Beware of practicing your righteousness. He says, listen, I'm assuming you're all going to do these behaviors. I've already told you, if you don't give, if your behaviors don't reflect God, if you don't pray, you need to start there. But he says, beware of practicing these things before men to be noticed by them. What is your heart? Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. Did I make that up? Now, if you guys, here's what I did for you, because I know that you guys, you want me to do the hard work. I parsed out the Hebrew, the Greek, the Aramaic of what no means. You know what it means? I didn't do any of that because it means no. It means no. If you look at the actual Greek, it just means no. You will get no reward, so be very, 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 very careful. Because when you were more, have you guys thought about this? God is a gentleman. Jesus is, he doesn't force himself in sometimes where he's not wanted. Now, will he? Can he? Absolutely. But when you are more concerned, let's stick to this though, when you are more concerned with how people perceive you than how God sees you, God will honor your request. You say, ooh, that hurt? Think it, gross, yeah, I like it. When you are more concerned with how people view you than how God views you, God will honor your request. God will say, okay, listen, if that's the kind of relationship you want, where I will stand off to the side and you can elevate how people view you, you can do the things. And I can tell you what this past year has taught me is this, personally. There are all kinds of people that talk into my life and tell me how I should be, what I should do, and how I should respond, right? And every time that I've thought that makes good sense, for whatever reason, God has said, that's not what I'm telling you to do. This is how I want you to behave. And I can tell you that when that has been the occasion, I have chosen some very painful times to honor what God has asked me to do, because I want to tell you something. He will also honor that request, will he not? When I say I want to grow deeper into you, I want the blessings for my family that you have to give, and I'm going to do that by pursuing you, will he not honor that request? Be very careful. Be very careful what you seek, because the reward you seek will be the reward you receive. And he says, Jesus is saying in this thing that's been misused to make other rules, to make other behaviors, to do the exact thing he says don't do, to become more religious. Jesus is saying, If their blessing is what you crave, well, that is all you'll get. And that should be terrifying for those of us who want more. Because here's a spiritual truth revealed by Jesus. Yet again, I'll say it again on your card. The blessings you seek are the blessings you will receive. So choose carefully. And here's the end of this thing. If you discover that you are concerned with people's perceptions of you, if in this good people and are wonderful people, myself included, that we're good people, we want the right thing. None of us are good, you know what I'm saying? Good Christian people who really do want to pursue God, and we discover, I have an issue in this area, I have an issue, then there may be some heart surgery involved. And he says, you're going to have to do some things. Maybe you should increase the privacy surrounding your giving, right? Maybe you should. Maybe if you're somebody who gives, but you want people to know, maybe you should just shut up. Maybe you should stop talking about it entirely. Maybe you should make, well, thank you. Maybe you should make it a rule. Maybe you should make it a rule that you say, you know what, I'm not, to your wife, this is a big, we give to everything, and then we want all the stuff said about us, whether it's the booster club, and you know what, maybe you should just do it all. What do you think it means? No strings attached. Increase it. Release it entirely. Release it so much so, and this is what it means. If you're somebody who gives, but you still don't, you go, I don't like that Don makes $5,500 a month. I don't like that. Don shouldn't make $5,500 a month. I don't like the fact that we're paying for Don's insurance now so him and Michelle can have insurance. I don't like that. I don't have insurance. And some of you, I know this is church stuff. I don't like that we pay Spencer $3,600 a month. I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't like that we're trying to pay Spencer's insurance. I don't have insurance. I would say to you that honestly, we decide on those things through prayer, and I'm here to tell you this. If you say to that, well, I don't like it, you never gave your money away in the first place. Amen. If you say, well, I'm going to stop giving my money until we do this or that, you use it for control, for influence. Now, if you have wisdom that you want to speak into our lives, come talk to me. But man, don't make it about money. Do you understand? Don't make it about money. Don't think my money, I gave it, I tithed it. Do you want the reward to be credited to you as righteousness or not? Give it away. Once it's gone, act as if your left hand didn't even know what your right hand gave. Has no clue what the hand of righteousness gave. You don't even want, you just do this stuff in such a way you've released it entirely. Focus on your private prayer life. If you have a hard issue with this, why don't you, again, I'm not saying maybe stop praying publicly. I'm saying, why don't you increase your private prayer time? He said, go somewhere in secret. Why don't you, if you think, I don't know if I pray for the right reasons, the right motivation, why don't you just start doing it where no one knows except you and God? Do some heart surgery. Go somewhere. Pray. Be intentional, which is exactly, as it turns out, what citizens of God's kingdom do anyway. They seek to know God's heart, to display His heart to the world. By praying, they display God's heart by giving. They want to experience the freedom that He promises. And I can tell you, as we wrap this thing up right now, if you do these things in such a way that God's heart is your motivation, that devotion and not validation is why you actually pursue Jesus, your righteous behaviors are done for the right reasons, not to stand before man now, but to stand before God later and hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. If this is your motivation, I can tell you this. Well, the good news is you will get the reward you seek, will you not? Because the rewards you seek will always be the rewards you receive. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for a good word. Thank you so much for fun with the family. Thank you for good music and good worship through music. May we all be touched by this in such a way that we transform ourselves first to look more like you so that we can transform the world around us. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.